It's amazing to think how many series and video games manage to stand the test of time with both a multitude of mainline and side story pieces like Dragon Quest, which in just 3 years' time will be approaching 40 years from its initial release date of the first game. And here we are towards the end of 2023, and with a new entry in Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince getting an exclusive release on the Nintendo Switch. A side series to which I was actually introduced to on the Game Boy Color with Dragon Warrior Monsters at the time because of my love for Pokemon. What's going on, crew? Joe here, and this is my review for Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince for the Nintendo Switch. We'll be covering the story as always in a comical fashion while giving breakdown and gameplay and my overall thoughts on the game at the end. Once again, thank you for Square Enix for providing a review code for this game. And so without further ado, let's clock in. Our story starts off with our hero Sorrow walking the lonely road. He faints like a Pokemon trainer after losing a battle, only to be found by Purple Vegeta.
Oh, that's not my son?
Earlier that day. Back at the village, Sorrow comes across a couple of kids who decide to pick him up because, well, kids are jerks and don't have them. Parenting.
Sorrow gets the Kevin Nash boo while Evan, a random kid trying to save our hero, gets dropped from the running interference like Titus O'Neil.
Later that night, Evan comes knocking on Sorrow's door, talking about how the Shriveler took his dad and is coming back for the rest of them. I can't make this up. This is the real story, y'all. Bear with me here. We're gonna be in for a trip. As any other normal kid with white hair and Gerudo eyes would do, Sorrow decides to take matters into his own hands, marching into the cave where Evan's dad is being held captive. In this moment, Trunks decides to go Super Saiyan Rose and defeats the Great Value Firebrand like he did with Frieza. So check it, he did all of this only for Evan to snitch on Homeboy because he just realized now that kids shouldn't be able to go Super Saiyan without their fathers being beat up for several seasons as fodder, unless you're Goku. So the whole town calls in a UAV radar so they know where to napalm this poor kid's home with his bedridden mom. Oh, never mind, she's running. Luckily, they make it out in time thanks to plot armor, but Mom, we'll get back to her. She decides to take a long nap after running cross-country track. Oh, she's not dead yet? We flash forward to that moment where future Trunks fell down with Purple Vegeta.
Gets up, punk!
Who retells the events that just occurred, and he decides he's going to talk to his pops, who just happens to be Randolpho, the Tyrant of the Underworld. With a name like that, I'm staying away. I'm sorry, I'm just not messing with a dude that has Tyrant of the Underworld in his name. But anyway, Sorrow tries to ask him to cure his mom. But little does he know how much of a savage Randolpho really is. This man has some Black Air Force energy. Not only does this man say he can heal his mom, but he doesn't do it for funsies. Trunks goes Super Saiyan with the Z Sword again, but Randolpho throws down his trap card.
You fell into my trap card.
He uses that one energy beam that destroys the planet Namek in like 20 episodes all over Sorrow, which now curses him from being able to physically hurt any monsters. But what about verbally? Like, hey monster, you're like a penis because you have one eye, Eileen. Got him! Sorrow then awakens in front of Omega Shenron, the all-seeing dragon. He tells the young Gerudo that his mom passed away before they were able to make the time skip part of his story. Oh no, that really sucks. The dragon offers to remove his monster-related blood from his body so he can be cured of the curse, but the boy refuses, telling Falcor that he has to slay his father and become the master of all monster kind. It's a story about revenge. Oh, that's great. That's great. The dragon disconnects him from the Wi-Fi and we fade to black once more. It's from here the game takes a time skip,
And thus, Sorrow's journey begins to not only become the master of monster kind, but also resolve all of monster kind's problems along the way, while meeting some familiar faces of Dragon Quest IV. Will he be able to find a cure to his own disease? Does he truly care about the world's problems? Why does she cry crystals? All this and more next time on Dragon Ball.
Before I dive into the gameplay, over 90% of you watching aren't subscribed to the channel. So if you're enjoying what you see here and what you just heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you can be notified when my next video goes live. Now back to the review. I caught a couple of videos where I think some folks might have not had the chance to fully dive into the game's mechanics for one reason or another, so I'll be going a little more nitty gritty in this part, more so than usual. Players can of course carry a party of up to 8 monsters. 4 will be in your main party, while the other 4 will act as your reserve units, so you can swap out at any point during the start of each turn. They'll also immediately pop out should your entire party take a fatal blow that kills them all. You don't have to worry about taking up a turn for swapping out a party member as well, which is really cool. Think of hitting the fight action as your final confirmation button so you can get all of your item uses, tactic changes, swaps, and individual monster moves before hitting that fight button. You can also hit that fight button right off bat and it'll just auto attack everybody. Speaking of, if you hit ZR, you can also just auto battle and it'll keep going for every battle until you decide to not anymore, which is really nice for grinding mechanics. And if you hit the ZL button, it'll do 3 times speed as well. So that way you can not only just auto battle, you can speed up, and it saves so much time on like grinding for certain abilities, which we'll get into a little bit later on. This game does a lot to try to streamline things and make life as easy as possible for doing every single thing from synchronization to buying items to doing the monster swaps all in one place. And it is such a time saver, a lifesaver. They really thought this out in this game, which I really appreciate. You'll use your scout feature to recruit monsters. Your monsters will hit them, causing the meter to reach a certain percentage, giving you a chance to see whether or not this monster will actually join your party. If it's successful, they'll join, but if you fail, they have a chance to be enraged, making them a little stronger in battle. So it's a little bit of a risk and reward. Sometimes you won't be able to scout monsters right away, and in order to increase your odds, you'll have to battle in the Colosseum to increase your rank street cred amongst monsters, making them want to join you as you try to use the scout feature again. Also, if you happen to stumble upon one of the more giant monsters in the area and manage to defeat them, that'll increase your odds when scouting too. The environments you traverse when battling monsters or fast travel to another area have different seasons. This also plays into what section you'll be able to travel through to reach a higher plane in each echelon you're in. Areas with vines will only grow during certain seasons, and you can also cross water when it turns to ice during the winter since you can't swim in this game. It really makes you change up the way you're traveling to certain destinations or looking for certain treasure chests as well. Part of the progression in the story is through Colosseum battles. You'll have to change up strategy a bit because you can't use turn-based function here, but you can change up the tactics of how your characters treat each battle, which plays a factor the deeper you get into the game, or helps if you find yourself a little outmatched early on. Since you only have the option to auto fight during these particular battles, you'll have to rely on your team's strength and ability to know where to focus your healing and buffs based on what tactics you have each party member focused towards. This means you should pay attention to where you're using those talent points your monsters gain when leveling up on both offensive and passive skills to make sure you have a more balanced team. This seems like a more detailed way of how things worked back in the very first Monsters game, so it's nice to see it being involved in this iteration. I personally never got to play the Joker series, so I'm literally going from the first Dragon Quest Monsters game to this one. These tend to get more expansive as you pass on certain skills to monsters you try to create through the synthesize process, which we'll get into right now, because the synthesize feature, which I think Pokemon competitive fans will really like, also allows you to match up 2 of your monsters as parents, create a new monster while having a few of the traits you've built up to be carried over in one of the newer, stronger monsters. Once that monster is synthesized, the 2 previous monsters will be gone forever. Well, sort of. I'll explain that little thing you may have an issue with later on. There are certain monsters that are only available through synthesis, so keep that in mind. This also makes it worth scouting multiples of the same monsters, since you can create different ones using the same variations. Monsters also need to be above level 10 to synthesize, but that's not really a worry after the first 2 sections of the game in terms of scouting, and even easier when you bring on a newborn into your party in an area with stronger monsters. I brought my small fry dragon into a level 15 and up area, and jumped from like level 1 to 5 in one battle. So if you're concerned about the grind, it isn't as bad as you might think, especially if you have fast speed and auto battle enabled. Now, I have heard some complaints about the frame rate, some of which I personally think may have just been overly exaggerated for content creation purposes, but I feel like since it's already been out there and mentioned, that it should be brought into this review as well. The only time I've personally caught frame dips is when the wind blows in for season changes. It's like so infrequent that it doesn't happen all of the time. I tried to recreate it for somebody on stream and it didn't happen. I was like, dude, this just happened like 20 minutes prior. Why can't I show you this? I'm not going crazy, because they asked me about the frame rate issues. And I was like, it's so infrequent. And that's the perfect example right there. So if you're seeing it on stream, it's because I finally caught it And I said stream, sorry, but you know what I mean, in this video. The only other consistent thing I've noticed in this game so far is that when there's multiple monsters on the field from like a slight distance, they do that thing like in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet where they like drop to like 15 frames, so they're doing like the dun, 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 dun. And again, that didn't bother me, but hey, people made a big enough fuss about it. I'm talking about it here. I'm annoyed that I'm talking about something so minuscule here. We're not talking about anything game breaking. Can we move on from this nonsense? Thank you. There's also multiplayer in the form of battling online with other folks, but like my friend Felix Wind once said,
I'm allergic.
Now onto the DLC, because the game's deluxe version is where I think I saw the second most contention. Like, people were more upset about this frame rate thing more so than the DLC, which I was actually shocked, but also it's almost the end of 2023. I shouldn't be surprised by anything at this point. The DLC comes with 3 cosmetics, an accessory to increase an attack on the monster early on in the game, and 3 event-based quests that I think 2 of which could have been included in the endgame. The first is Coach Joe's Dungeon Gym, which is straight up endgame content quests for those looking for more of a challenge. Sorrow's got to bring certain monsters for each quest based on the type of rank your monster is, or monster family. This I personally feel should have been added directly into the main game after one would beat the main story. That's just my personal opinion though. The mole hole allows players to go through certain levels of a dungeon where all monsters you previously scouted, released through synchronization, or really rare monsters can be scouted. This is another thing I feel like could have been an unlockable thing at the end game, and maybe it is for the hardcore, or maybe it's just one of those things where, yeah, you pay to be able to make life easier. And don't get me wrong, you have the 3 times in the auto battle speed, whatnot, but this being like, hey, I worked up and spent all these hours on this game, I beat it, I got all these really cool monsters, but I want to be able to get everything, right? And it's just like, you'll just be spending a little bit more time, and like, it is the traditional way. This is just like an extra thing, and I don't know, maybe I'm just trying to reason with it in my head, standard versus deluxe on this one, but I feel like this could have been a reward for beating the game, and that's just an unfortunate circumstance that they put on there to make people buy the deluxe edition. I don't know, I guess I'm just torn because it feels like that something should have been rewarded for endgame stuff instead of, hey, spend more money to do this, you know, extra stuff that could have easily been in the game. The last DLC is the treasure trunks, which this one, okay, this can be DLC straight up. Every hour you can go back and it'll give you a new item to help you along your journey. Simple, straight to the point. Like, this makes sense as DLC. It's almost like getting cosmetic items, but in this case, it's not cosmetic items. It's actually getting, you know, something that'll help you out in your journey. And like, don't get me wrong, at the end of the day, none of these have a major hindrance on the overall main journey of the story. But if you're one of those wanting more after you've gone through everything else the game has to offer, 2 of these DLC things feel like they could have easily been things to offer after the main story. And I know I keep repeating myself there, but like, that's how much I feel for everybody that's just getting the regular game and then having to pay more for that deluxe edition. At the same time, I guess those of the hardest of hardcore were probably already factored into sales when Square Enix decided to release a deluxe edition of this game. So they knew going in, the hardest of hardcore that is going to play the heck out of this game is going to want to get everything. So they got us in the end. I always treat games and DLC on a case-by-case basis because I don't think all of it is a bad thing. I just think some approaches may miss the mark at times. DLC aside, I really have enjoyed my experience with Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. Not having too much knowledge on the overall series outside of the very first Dragon Warrior monsters on Game Boy Color and Dragon Quest XI for about 8 hours, I felt like I was able to really jump into this world without having to know any extensive lore that I know the series is known for. If anything, it's made me realize that I have a giant hole in my JRPG fandom that I need to fulfill somewhere down the road, and that has me excited to tackle. Finding out through the community this game kind of serves as a prequel of sorts to Dragon Quest IV gives me a better understanding of how I can approach some of the previous titles and maybe really gravitate towards Sorrow's Dark Road. That's another point. For all the goofy monsters and sometimes wacky and delicious worlds, this game's main plot is really dark, and the subplots woven throughout have really made it worth wanting to see how it all pays off. Did you plan on picking up Dragon Quest monsters? Let me know in the comments below and what your favorite monster's been. There's a demo for the game on the eShop, so if you want to try it before you buy, that's totally an option in this case. You can't carry story progression over, however, any monsters you scout will be available once you unlock the paddock in the main story. And that's all the time I've got, and I hope this review has helped. Sorry for like the really nitty gritty on the gameplay part. It personally bothers me when there's people out there that don't do most of the research into a game or play the game, and they just go off and spout and complain before actually playing the game themselves. And that just it gets to me, y'all. I'm sorry. I get real passionate about that stuff. Like, if you're really excited about a game, go on in, get everything out of it, and then come up with the stuff. Doesn't seem like that happened this time around. Anyway, you can catch me on Twitch Thursday through Monday from 7 p.m. Eastern time to midnight, where I'm still running through this game and Bayonetta Origins currently. So you might even catch me, and hopefully with, you know, a haircut of some sort at this point. My hair is a goddamn mess. I'm working on getting that Turok 3 remastered review next, unless I end up beating Bayonetta over the weekend first, which is highly unlikely right now, considering my schedule being all out of whack right now. Working on a couple of side project things as well, so apologies. These next couple of weeks are going to be wacky, but then we'll be back just in time for the holidays. Anyway, this is Joe clocking out. Y'all have an amazing weekend. This is probably going up on a weekend, okay? So enjoy it. Get outside if it's warm. If it's cold, work as hell, like it is over here where I'm at, stay indoors, dog. Like, you don't need outside. That snow, that cold weather, the wind blowing in your face, you don't need that. Anyway, take care. Love y'all.